All right, let's go ahead and get started so we can get you guys on your way. This is kind of taking place at the driving course this year. You're still expected to go out and drive the PFA rodeo course on your own. That's in Target Solutions. That's still your driving component for the year. What we're doing this year is doing some maintenance stuff with the engines, and we're also going to fill you in a little bit about what's kind of been going on behind the scenes. We brought back the DO committee this last year. I don't know, not many of you were here when we had, actually I don't think any of you were here when we had the original DO committee. About 20 years ago they had a DO committee, ran, kind of handled all things DO. It got disbanded, heard a bunch of different reasons why, but it's taken this long now to kind of bring it back and move forward with it. So we've got a group that we're going to be doing the DO committee. We'll be responsible for all things driving, all things pumping with PFA. We'll help provide training, ongoing training, and we'll also supply recommendations to ops and training and based on driving, truck driving, pumping, different things like that. One of the subcommittees is a driving subcommittee of the big DO committee. We will be working this next year on putting together a driving program for the department, whether we build our own program, we bring in a company with their own instructors to teach, or we go back and do something like NAPD or Smith System. We're still going to be looking at those directions for those type of things. Today, Brad's going to be taking you through the apparatus, going through some care and maintenance things, go through some things that we can do as drivers maybe to help with wear and tear on the rigs. So it's been real good this morning, the two classes we've gone. So I'm going to turn it over to him and we'll get moving with that.
Okay, just a couple of things that we're seeing that I want to go over and make sure you guys are utilizing the tools that you're given on the trucks. And the biggest tool you're given on the truck to save my brakes is the Jake brake. So does everyone understand how the Jake brake works and why you're supposed to use it? Okay. What it does is it holds the exhaust valve closed on the engine when you let off the throttle. So all that compression kind of holds the piston from going all the way up. And it creates a braking or a lagging action that you don't normally get in a diesel engine. You do in a gas engine when you let off the gas, but in a diesel you don't. It free flows when you let off the gas in a diesel engine. So those things, and that's a tool for you to use. If I'm not driving immersion through the city, I can drive one of these trucks almost without having to touch the brake except to stop, come to a complete stop at a stoplight. Or, if somebody turns out in front of me or whatever, I can't anticipate. But anticipation is huge when you're driving something this size, and knowing how to use that tool and the best way to use it. It does have 3 settings, okay? Low, medium, and high. And most of all, I want you using that in instances of inclement weather. So mostly with ice and snow. You don't want to leave the Jake brake in high on ice and snow because it might, I don't know if you've ever driven a manual transmission, jammed it in the second gear and pumped the clutch when it's snowy, it'll just lock the back tires up, right? That's kind of the effect you'll get if you use the Jake brake on ice and snow. It's kind of the same effect. It takes a lot for that to happen, but we do want to be cognizant of that possibility that could happen. So only in inclement weather would I range it from medium to low. Other than that, I would leave it in high all the time. I do jump in trucks and see them in different positions, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if we're worried about the noise going through neighborhoods or, and I do know that's a consideration in the middle of the night. We don't want to be caught in too much ruckus and creating problems that way. But leave them in high as much as possible because that saves the brakes. We have 2 different types of brake systems on these trucks. Most are disc, but we do have drum brakes in the rear. Those are much cheaper to maintain. You're looking at about $85 for a pair of shoes and a couple hours to replace them on both sides. On a pair of pads for the rotors, you're looking at about 5 hours of labor to replace those pads, plus the added cost of about $375 per side to do those pads. So they're supposed to last longer, and they're supposed to break better, but at the same time they're more expensive. So that's just one of the things that we see wearing out quite a bit, and we will. It's, you know, you guys are running these things in severe duty. It's not, we're not just driving around town delivering groceries. So we do realize that there's quite a bit of severe service being put to these trucks. So, but the best we can minimize those by using the tools we have, the better off we're going to be. Is there any questions on the Jake brake and how to use that, how to deploy that? Okay, who has checked their transmission with the keypad and knows how and is comfortable with that? Okay, if you're not comfortable with that, I'm going to give you a little short how-to today on that. There's a couple of pre-parameters to having being able to do that. One is to make sure the truck is warmed up above 160 degrees temperature. Two, make sure you're on a level surface. And then three, you go ahead and do the task. So when you jump in the truck, in neutral, running, you're going to press both the arrow keys at the same time, press and release. It's going to go into a countdown starting from 8. And it's not 8 seconds. It's, I don't know what the count is, but it takes about a minute to go all the way through it. And once it does that, it's going to display OL for oil level. And either OK if it's OK, or LO for low, and then the number of quarts, or HI for high, and the number of quarts it's high. This is a much, much, much more accurate way of checking the transmission fluid. And can be done with the cab down, especially for the truckies. You don't have to raise the aerial. You can do this on a daily check. You can actually just check the transmission fluid without raising the cab, which is an added bonus. And it is much more accurate than checking with the dipstick, and a little bit safer because you're not getting around the heat or the oil. So can anybody tell me what a black streak coming from a lug nut would be?
So that bearing?
Loose lug nut. So on an aluminum wheel, where you got steel touching aluminum, if the lug nut's loose at all, and I'm talking, these are torqued to 350 foot-pounds. If the torque is off by 200 foot-pounds and it's down to like 100 and so, the nut will actually rub on the wheel, and you'll get a black streak running from the nut down where water runs in there, and you'll get black streaks, and that's the first indication of a loose lug nut. You won't be able to tell by getting in here with your hand and actually trying to move the lug nut. If it's that loose, probably should have caught it before then, but you'll see the black streaks on either one of the wheels. For the trucks with the steel wheels, it'll be a rust trail, and it's pretty noticeable, and it does happen pretty fast. You'd be surprised how little moisture it takes to get in there and then pass through and give you the streak. But if you see that, definitely let us know. It's an out of service criteria. We don't want wheels falling off. That's really bad. So we'll get that taken care of right away. That's one of the things we'll get taken care of right away. The other thing we'll get taken care of right away is hub seal leaks. That'll just throw out oil all over the outside of the wheel. Checking those, you don't necessarily need to remove the cap. You can just take a rag and wipe the glass. You can see oil above the rim here, the aluminum rim. You're good. Okay. There's a range in there. There's 2 lines on the cap here. Some you can see and some you can't. But there's 2 lines on there. If it's between those 2 lines, you're good to go. Tread depth on steer tires. Can anybody tell me what the minimum tread depth would be in 30 seconds of an inch? 4. So 4 30 seconds or more is serviceable. 4 30 seconds or less is unserviceable on any 2 adjacent treads. So if the outside of this tire is wearing,
John Airport, Good Samaritan, 708 Police, affirmative 710B as in boy. Cross Alpha Crestray, 337 respond at you.
so if the outside of this tire is wearing and it's bald on the outside, but these 2 treads out here are good, the tire's still legal to run. It's okay. More times than not, we're going to err on the side of safety, and we're going to replace that tire and figure out why it's wearing like that. Some of these tires just do that. Both the outsides will wear no matter where we have the toe set. because of the weight of the truck, the terrain you're driving in, how many right turns, how many left turns, whatnot, crown of the road, those kinds of things. But we typically will replace that tire if it gets to that point. Drive tires. Who can tell me what the minimum tread depth on a drive tire would be? 230 seconds. It's almost bald. The only time you'll see an almost bald tire is on the inside dual. Okay, those wear out faster than the outside duals because when you're going around a corner in the differentiation, and then that tire's spinning faster or scrubbing harder than the outside tire. Okay, so you definitely want to take a look, get underneath there and take a look at that inside tire. Don't just glance at the outside tire and just take for granted that the inside tire is good. We like to.
Should we be using tire whackers?
You can, it's your choice. I'd rather you check the pressure than use a thumper. Thumper's the fast way to do it. If you're using a thumper, a flat tire makes a thud, the full tire's gonna bounce back at you, okay? Your choice. But I'd rather you check it with the pressure. And speaking of pressure, 10 PSI below the tire rating on the tire. So if the tire says 130 and you check it, it's at 120, it's flat. And they need to know about it so we get it fixed.
Charlie mentioned 2 Delta Medical 229 Clover, 229 Clover Compass Maple, and 29 John Wood. Just want to mention.
So 10 PSI low on the rating of the tire. Depends on the engine. Some engines, the four-wheel drive engines, I run a little bit lower than the street engines. And then the trucks are different than the engines are as well. So 10 PSI low is going to be a flat. I need a phone call and we'll take care of that. Any questions on that? My tire guy's pretty fast, so don't think, oh, it's just 10 PSI low and I can take it. Because 10 turns into 20 and turns into really flat really quick. So just be aware of that. Batteries. These batteries aren't like the old batteries with the lead posts on them. So you're not going to see a whole bunch of corrosion. But when you do see corrosion, that either means the battery's leaking or the actual post is loose. So you can check those with your hand. Make sure you're washing your hands after you touch anything with a battery. If you do see corrosion, the best thing I can tell you for the immediate is to put some sodium bicarbonate on it, baking soda, wash it down. Never use compressed air to blow batteries off at all. You don't want to get that stuff airborne and then in your lungs or in your face. It's deadly. But you just want to make sure all those connections are tight and secure. We don't see too many loose connections, but we do see them from time to time and they do cause significant problems. Okay. Checking the truck this way is always a good idea to reach down and check this drag link. It's the long bar between the steering knuckle and the steering gear. They shouldn't pop or move at all. If they do, give me a call and replace them. The steering gear itself, you want to make sure it's free of any leaks. Okay. We classify leaks in 3 different classes. Class 1 is just wet, but not dripping. Class 2 is wet and forming a drop, but the drop doesn't leave the component, it doesn't hit the ground. Class 3 forms a drop and the drop hits the ground. So if you see fluid on the ground, it's a class 3 leak. Things that are going to put you out of service on class 3 leaks, any fuel leak at all, class 1, 2, or 3 is going to be out of service. Power steering, any class 3 leak on a power steering box, out of service. Oil, it really depends on what it is. If it's a class 3 leak of oil, I need to know about it so we can check it out. More times than not, it's not going to put you out of service if it's not profusely leaking, like a quart an hour or something stupid like that. But you do need to know about it. You don't necessarily need to class the leak, but if you want to start using that lingo, it's going to be in the new RTA system, so kind of get used to that. On this side of the engine, there's one primary fuel filter. If you're ever fueling at the above ground storage tanks, that fuel is dyed red. So if you are leaking fuel, it's going to appear red on the ground if you've ever fueled at an above ground storage tank. What else is red? Antifreeze, right? So a lot of times it's hard to tell the difference between the two. I don't want you reaching down and tasting it like your dad taught you. But just know that those two fluids are going to look the same on the floor if you've ever fueled in an above ground store, which most trucks have. And the dye stays with the truck. It doesn't matter how many tanks you get from the Schrader's pump. After you put dye in the truck, it stays with the truck forever. Because that's one of the DOT things that keep us honest on the tax-free fuel. So that's how they do that with the dye. Hoses. Hoses and connections, you want to make sure all of those are tight. Be careful of heat, you know, after you run an engine. It's best to do your truck check at the beginning of the day, kind of before a call if you can. I know some stations that's tough to do. But you actually want to be reaching and grabbing these components as much as possible. Wear a glove, whatever you need to do to keep from the heat. If you choose to wash your engine bay, I'm okay with that. If you have a pressure washer at your station, I'm okay with that too. The only thing I want you to be aware of is right here, this electronic control module. It's got all these wires coming into it. I don't want direct water ever sprayed into those connections. They're watertight when they're new, but over time they deteriorate. They will leak water into there and then cause a boatload of problems if we get water in those components. Antifreeze. If you were to get a truck and you're adding, and you don't have any visible leaks, no fluid on the ground, and let's say you're adding 2 quarts a day, quart a day, and you form it, and then the next shift comes in, you pass on, hey, we added 2 quarts, and we added 2 quarts, and we added 2 quarts. These red engines in particular have an EGR cooler on them. And it cools the exhaust gas so it can be reburnt. And it's got antifreeze passing through it, so it cools it off to a point. If those are leaking, they'll leak like vapor into the system, and we won't know until we get a really bad oil sample back where you got antifreeze in the oil. So if you're adding just a little bit of coolant at a time, let somebody know as soon as possible. We can get the EGR cooler off there and get it tested and either get a new one on there or get the old one repaired. That's for those of you driving diesel trucks around town too. If you're adding a little bit of coolant at a time, you need to be aware of that. It can create some huge problems. The air compressor is located in the same spot on a Detroit that it is on a Cummins, down here on the corner. This one, the head on it's silver because it's new, but you want to check all the same things you would check on an engine. You want to check on the air compressor. It's got oil passing through it. It's got antifreeze passing through it, and make sure all the lines are tight. It's one of the things we can see from time to time that will create a down engine problem because we didn't catch it soon enough. So are there any questions on this side of the engine, wheels, and tires? Okay, go ahead.
You want us to check air pressure even on these cat eye ones?
Yeah. So on the cat eyes, don't always trust the cat eye because it can get frozen in a spot, and one of the tires might go low and it doesn't move, it doesn't open up. If it is open, of course, you need to let somebody know, but I would definitely continue to check pressure at that one pressure port for the 2 tires.
Okay. And if it's down, it doesn't matter because those are tied together. So you
Those
know
are tied
which
together,
tire.
so yeah, you won't know which tire it is, but I'll send somebody out and get it taken care of. Okay, go around the other side. The thing to notice on this side of the engine is the level of the air intake. We haven't had a significant flood here in Fort Collins in a long time, but we never know when you might encounter high water. So you want to be aware of where that air intake is according to where the truck's at. Because you don't want to suck water into the engine, and it happens really there's a lot of air moving through that air filter, and it happens really fast. So on this truck, the air intake comes up right about the bumper level. So if you were ever to get into water and it comes up to the bumper, you want to stop. The other things we're checking on this side of the engine is the belt. 99% of our trucks, again, run serpentine belts. You want to roll that belt over best you can and check the ribs and the grooves for cracks. If you see cracks in there, we definitely want to replace that belt. Checking the alternator connections, you can reach in there and check those. Just be careful, again, with heat. Same thing for the air conditioner, you can check the compressor. If it's leaking anything at all, we need to know about that, plus and checking the lines on top. For exhaust leaks, any exhaust leak between the turbo and the DPF is going to be harmful to you guys in the cab. You may or may not smell it, you may or may not see it, but if it's leaking, you'll see soot trails along any of these connections. These are better than the aerials. The aerials have slip tight connections. They don't have these couplers. So the slip tight connections tend to leak a little bit more, but you'll see those black trails on the slip tight connections. We can get those tighter. We can put RTV in there. There's other things we can do to make sure that those don't leak and give you guys the sensation of being lightheaded or anything like that. Has anybody noticed that stuff in your truck? Or it's really easy to see, but it's really harmful over time, and we like to get exhaust leaks fixed as fast as possible. That would be for an over-the-road truck. That's an out-of-service criteria. For us, we'll probably let you run it, but we'll fix it. We'll fix it as fast as we can. It's one of those things we'll fix pretty quickly. Driveline, there's really not a whole lot you can do as far as checking the driveline except for a visual check. If you see any of the U-joints slinging a whole lot of grease, or you hear a loud popping noise when you're putting it in gear, or you hear a loud popping noise when you're coming to a stop, those are indications that you've got a U-joint that are worn. And we want to get that taken care of as soon as possible as well. Pumping. So I had a question earlier this morning about pumping and volume or pressure. I don't care. You guys do what the situation depicts. The engine can handle either one. We buy dual stage pumps for a reason, so that you guys have that option of doing either or. The engine can handle it, the transmission can handle it. Put it through its paces. If it doesn't handle it and it breaks, I'll figure out why it broke and we'll fix it. But do whatever you need to do to take care of your situation at any given time. Does that make sense? So that's about all I've got. Short class. I appreciate you guys doing what you do, and keep on doing what you're doing.